Hey there! In this episode I'm gonna do something a little bit different than I usually do. So I'm gonna talk about 5 different songs from the soundtrack to SteamWorld Heist II that I wrote. And I'm gonna go through some of the production techniques that I used. So SteamWorld Heist II is a turn-based tactics shooter game by Thunderful in Gothenburg, Sweden. It was released on August 8th in 2024, and this time around I shared the soundtrack duties with an American band called Steam Power Giraffe. So they wrote songs, actual songs with vocals and harmonies and stuff for all the bar scenes in the game and some cut scenes and a few other really important sort of emotional moments in the game. And they did an amazing job doing so. So this first track that I'm gonna talk about is the player sub music. And this whole track stemmed from the idea that I got when I was browsing around for some interesting sound effects. So I found this really cool sound effect that is recorded in the hull of a boat. I wanted something, I was obviously looking for like submarine sounds and boat sounds and just seeing if I could find something inspiring. So I found this sound. So here I have processed the sound a little bit, but not as much as you would expect, because the original sound sounds like this. So I could instantly hear that it sounds like a proper beat. Most of the stuff that I use is already there. So I was super excited. And I kept a lot of the rhythms and stuff. Like that sound, I mean, it almost sounds like a rim shot. It's really cool. And it has a tiny, tiny, quick delay after it if you listen to it. And then there's some cool stuff happening. That creak, for example, sounds like a drum fill almost. And then a couple of other... That one as well is almost like a tom fill or something. But it's quite a noisy sound, so I had to sort of clean it up a bit. So I used some isotope denoiser on it, and then I did some other little things on a few other channels, but with the same sound. And there I sort of accentuate the little delay thing that's already happening in the track itself. And apart from this sort of rhythmic foundation, I could also mention a few other things. I used the sound of an like old cuckoo clock. But this sound is originally in a different tempo, so I quantized it to 8th notes, which created an interesting pattern because it stretched some notes to the left in the grid and some notes to the right. So if I undo the quantization, it sounds like this. Sort of irregular and in a different tempo altogether. So I sort of forced it into this BPM. And I combined it with some other like found sounds that aren't actual drum sounds, but like small recordings of mechanisms and stuff. Like so. And there's also some other rhythmic stuff going on. So if I move a bit further into the track and just play all the rhythmic stuff, it sounds like this. One of the main things about the track is that it's only 2 chords throughout most of the track, except for this part over here, which is sort of a middle 8 section or a bridge, or what do you want to call it. But other than that, it's just 2 chords, but it's actually, the 2 chords aren't in the same key, so it creates sort of an uneasy feeling. The first one is sort of a chord in a C pentatonic scale. It's like a sort of a F sus2 chord, I would say. And then the other one is sort of a sus4 chord, but in the A Dorian mode. So it has the F sharp that sort of messes it up so that the 2 chords don't feel like they're in the same key, because they aren't. So that creates sort of an uneasy feeling of like, that's sort of related to being in a submarine, not quite knowing where you're going, some tension building. And also the thing that stands out about the track is the flugelhorn played by Ellen Pettersson. She wasn't going to play on this track at all at first, but we recorded some horns for some other songs, and then I just asked her if she wanted to improvise some stuff on top of this one. So she did 2 takes, and it was brilliant. So we're going to listen to some of that soloed. I think the first one she played, the one that's up above here, mostly long notes. And then in this one I asked her to play a bit more freely. So she has this really lovely tone. There's obviously some reverb and delay on it, but it's, if you want to hear a tone just the way it is, so airy and beautiful, and she's amazing at doing these little pitch bends and stuff. Really beautiful stuff. And what also is worth mentioning about the flugelhorn is that I always like to have something, in this kind of track, I like to have something, an element that is improvised, because it helps with player fatigue. You don't get as easily tired of a track if there's something improvised going on it feels like it's constantly changing. And also the track is quite long, it's like 5 minutes long, and it's looping. We didn't have the possibility of having dynamic music in this section of the game, and it wouldn't really make sense, but the length of the track and the fact that in-game we start playing it randomly from 4 different points. So it's from the beginning, and then this section, and then sometimes it starts from the bridge section, and then sometimes from the last part. Moving on. So this is music that plays during the loadout section, when you choose which crewmates you want to go on each mission. We wanted this to be a bit militaristic, since you're going sort of into battle. So I took that quite literally and just went browsing for some like battle sounds, some warfare sounds. So I found this sound, and I'm gonna play a bit of it, sort of without any effects on it. Like distant cannons and stuff. It reminded me sort of like timpani sounds and that kind of stuff. But still, it does sound like war, so it's good. And then there's some other things. Some more high-pitched stuff over here. So I combined these two and did some other, well, mostly just cutting it up actually, to create this kind of drum pattern. Then I added snare drums to it. My friend Andreas Ba recorded 2 different snares, one really high pitched and one more low. And then there are 4 instances of them both. This is like the low pitched one. And this is another take of the same one. And this is the high pitched one. Also in 2 different takes. And then there's also a 3rd snare, there's just a sample that has sort of a different, more trebly tone. So it's also worth mentioning these really cool euphonium and flugelhorn things that Ellen recorded. They also kind of remind me of war horns, that kind of stuff. And then they blend with some electric guitar that I recorded up here. There's one of the beautiful pitchy things she's doing. Yeah, moving on to the next one. This is the Rattlers combat music. The thing about the Rattlers, they're sort of a class of enemies that you meet in the game, and they are robots that have switched out some of their parts for like bones, and they sort of have this bone cult thing going on. So obviously I started looking for some like bone sounds. I found a few that were pretty cool and that also had some rhythmic things going on, sort of unintentional rhythmic things. It's just a recording of somebody messing around with bones, I guess, or possibly like some sort of fake bone-like stuff. But it sounds like this. I found a few similar sounds that I layered and cut up, and I kept some of the interesting little rhythm things. For example, here. That thing I kept. So that the whole, I spread it out over the stereo field and made 5 different ones going from left to right. Still, I kept some sort of mess in it. I didn't want to make it super quantized and sort of tightly enveloped. So there's still some rhythmical mess in there to keep it sort of rattly and a bit, scary in some way. I can play the whole rhythm package. There's some drums that Andreas recorded. And then there's some sample drums as well. Beef it up. And then some shakers. So that's the whole rhythm section of this track. And another thing that I did that was kind of fun, because this track is kind of repetitive and it's almost meant to be, but you play these combat sections for quite a long time in the game. So to create some variation, I decided to, in this like orange-brown part here, is I change both the key and the tempo at the same time. So I go from, as you can see here, it's three quarters, but it's more of a 6/8 kind of rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then over here switch to 4/4 instead. And I switched the key up a couple of steps. And in this part I used an old ocarina of mine, and I recorded just two notes in a sort of pattern that I came up with. So in fifths. And then I EQ'd it quite aggressively to get even more of the like breathy sounds out of it. This is what it sounds without any effects. So I still did quite exaggerated breathing because I wanted that airy sound. Yes. Moving on to the next one. This is the Royal Navy combat music. And the thing that started this track out, and the thing that kind of stands out, is this really intense sound here. It's like a chain from a windmill or something. I combined it with a couple of similar sounds. The reason that I used these sort of field recordings and sound effects and that kind of stuff as rhythms is because we wanted this sort of mechanical feel in the game. These droids aren't super high-tech. They're steambots after all, so rather than just using like modern sci-fi digital sounding sounds, I went for some mechanical sounds. So this is sort of the rhythmic foundation of this track. And then there's also a couple of snares. Also the two different snares. So this is the atomic combat music, and it sounds like this. This is the part of the game where you meet these atomic bots, and they're a bit more high-tech. So in this section of the game, the music gets a little bit more electronic. But I still wanted to use some live drums to keep it consistent with the rest of the soundtrack. So I asked Andreas to play these rim shot patterns instead of playing the full kit. So it sounds a bit otherworldly in a way. And I will show you the fun part of this track, which is when a couple of the synths go into this filter that is playing almost too fast for its own good. So it's this Moog filter that's playing, and I'm sending the clean signals to the reverb before sending it to the filter, so you get a little bit of both. You can hear the filtered sounds, but you can sort of hear a reverb in the background. And then over here, I make it quite dry. And then I slowly bring the reverb back in again. But it really sounds like it's in the way back of the room compared to the filtered, bouncy stuff. And it gets a bit more noticeable as they play more high-pitched notes. It was sort of a fun way to use a kind of a sound that would normally be used in dance music, but to have it in this really high BPM that is almost like too fast for the envelope to make it, made it sound kind of cool in this setting. And what more? Yeah, I recorded some cello for this track. My friend Holmquist recorded some cello for a few of the tracks in the game. But it ended up sounding too human for this track, so I did some processing on it. A lot of distortion and some other filter stuff and some delay. This is just a bounce of it all, but just to give you a taste of it, this is more kind of what it sounded like raw. And then I wanted to use some cello again for this filtered fast part over here. And then I did some more messing with it so that it sounds like this. So there's again this Moog filter, but different setting, and a lot of tape delay and a lot of automation messing it up. Yeah, I also used this technique that I really like that I don't hear a lot in music anymore. But it's sort of inspired by the post-rock group Tortoise that I listened to a lot when I was like in my late teens, early 20s. And that's the idea of having a like really high-pitched note, like an ostinato, just like a one-note ostinato, using it sort of as a percussive element. So it's this thing over here. So I've bounced this down from something else that I did. I think I started out with like a pad sound, and then I think it started out with this one, and then I just filtered it and used a sort of sequencer thingy on it. And it's a technique that I like to use to make things intense in some way. And then I usually just find a note that sort of works for the whole piece. So it's usually the root note or a fifth. In this case, it's the fifth note of the scale that I'm using. Yes, I think that's about it. Also, I have one like bonus thing that I'd like to mention. And that's the fact that there's a sort of musical clue in the intro music of the game that actually tells you a lot of what's about to happen in the last part of the game. But you need to know what it is, which you obviously don't the first time around when you play it. So it's just a little hidden clue that's in the intro sort of a leitmotif that's used for one thing in the intro and then for another thing later on in the game. So that's something for you all to think about. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching.